have noted in the past that generally things, tend to move in, from the west to the east in terms of acceptance, in terms of, of influencing, mass sort of, influencing people to actually take on board any new aspect. But in the recent past, have had a lot of people are looking into something along the lines of the leadership approach seems to be moving a bit from the east to the west. Now, the Jack Ma style of leadership to a certain extent. So, more of an inclusive approach, more of, understanding the internal, the internal sort of aspects of what drives people, what drives their passion. Would like to get a little bit of insights regarding, in what way do you think that the style of leadership that people are actually bringing on board at this present moment is moving from a west, instead of a west to east progression, but from an east to west progression, for example, and what are your thoughts on this? What are your thoughts on this, and how different do you think the approach of a leader would be for their team, which is based in the West, towards their team, which is based in the East? So I would love Nick to actually give us a little bit of inputs regarding this first.
Yeah, great point, Yusuf, and thanks so much for your question. I mean, it's interesting because in the work that we do, like John Mattone Global, most of the work we do, like we do quite a bit of work, obviously, in the United States, right, and then Europe, but most of our work really is relatable in the West, right? Mm-hmm. And one of the reasons behind that and why the intelligent, quote unquote, intelligent leadership process is inherited by so many companies and businesses in the region is because we're so inner core oriented, right? And when you're working with a leader, right, inner core, right, your thinking patterns, your emotional makeup, your character, your value system, your self-concept really needs to be strong, right? And a leader or a CEO at the top, right, has to have a strong, vibrant character, maturity level, modest, have a vulnerability type attitude, right, open to new ideas. Mm-hmm. And that's where your employees and the culture changes when they're looking up to that leader, right, and they're actually vulnerable, right? Mm-hmm. So our process really is works everywhere, because of how it does have a little bit of a Buddhist type approach, right? I mean, we've done a lot of work in India and Sri Lanka, and John does a lot of work in the Middle East as well too. Mm-hmm. And when you're working with different cultures, right? Some cultures aren't as face-to-face or in your face. We might work with an organization, or John might work with a CEO in the United States. Might mm-hmm. be a little bit of a different approach than him working with a CEO in India or him working with a CEO in Saudi Arabia, mm-hmm. where he has to change his style a little bit. And that's when you guys know, as a coach, right, you have to be agile and you have to be flexible on how you do your work. That's the most important thing. But I can only speak really for our process, mm-hmm. where it definitely is moving from east to west. And remarkably, we do more work in this type of in the West region, so that's what I would say to that.
Thanks, Nick. Sandeep, your thoughts. I mean, how what are your thoughts on what the discussion is on about? Is it true, well, what people are thinking, that the East is having a little bit more influence on leadership, demystified, if I like to call it, worldwide, on the Western culture as well, where people in the West are actually, sitting up and actually looking and taking note of amazing leaders that are coming out from the East, per se?
Sure. Though while the leadership styles would be different in East and West, And because I've interacted with a lot of Indian CEOs and executives and coached them. My personal observation is, Indians as a community, or east side of the world, is a little more empathy, a little more emotional. So when I coach them, it's just not about business; it's about personal lives as well. They will they will talk about what happens with their friends, with their personal lives, and how that influences their work. Whereas, uh, go to the Western side, you'll see, it's more professional. It's only connected to work and nothing else. Uh, what probably we get to the West is the emotional connect, the empathy. We guys talk a lot, right? We want to share, we want to express a lot, and I think that's what East is bringing to the West. How do you connect? How do you communicate? Like authentically, how do you communicate? Uh, More expression is what I think in the leadership part we're bringing to the West. Though I can't say that it's the truth, but that's been my observation. This may be an exception, but yeah, I think that's fairly what we bring into the West.
Beautifully put, Sandeep.
I feel there's an interesting blend which is happening. For example, Eastern, it's more of spirituality, which I feel now it's getting somewhere, being that spiritual. And so I'll give you an interesting example. During my corporate career, I was reporting to the person who was I was reporting was from West, and whatever used to happen, he used to always say no problem, no problem. Even if I used to approach with a problem, he was like no problem, we are all good. And I used to wonder, initially, because I was not used to that style. I was like, it's a problem, and why is he not able to understand? And that's where then I felt it's more for them, for the West. It's like looking at the creative, the focus, moving, right? And it's okay if you fail or something, it's okay, the learning happens. And so I think now in today's leadership style, what I see is an interesting blend which is happening of both East as well as West, because all your leadership style would have shades of the culture. With geography you represent, they would have a lot of shades of the culture. But when I speak about the blend is when you see now today leaders vulnerability, being vulnerable or accepting, like yes, you don't know it, and having that learner mindset is something which is beautiful and which you can see in the East as well as West. And East, I feel in the Asian, it's slowly picking up. But I think spirituality is something which is getting into the West, that yes, as a leader nowadays, you find like they talk a lot even about the balance and the alignment. It's somewhere it's getting on. So yes, to add on to both their points, as Nick mentioned, like about the inner character, what is really important is about the inner character. And that's what I think it's getting demystified today. And you feel people are so the passion and legacy, living your legacy is something which has become very, very important. So I would feel that yes, there are differences, but today I feel at a melting point happening, wherein there's a beautiful blend from each of the practices which have been put. And that's what I feel, especially the next generation, the millennials, picking it up.
Beautifully
I would
put.
love to hear your point on this.
Puja, great point. And to that fact, I mean, and I think we're seeing a blend because, leadership is such a high topic right now, right? Everywhere, even more than I think it's ever been. But we're seeing so many, like the coaching world in general is, as far as like the population of people who are wanting to be business executive coaches, leadership coaches, it's increasing globally.
Absolutely.
Right? And these coaches are self-learners. So you're picking up pieces from the East, you're picking up pieces from the West, right? So it is, I like Puja's point as far as the blend.